Hello, protocols, packets, and programs. We are just a few weeks away from Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Start preparing your prompts and writing your recipes. We don't want LLMs to be left out of the awareness activities this year. Which means this week we share 2 more recorded interviews from Black Hat. So we're going to get to that in a second because first we're going to disassemble some AppSec news. Be aware and stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show to learn the latest tools and techniques to understand DevOps, applications, and the cloud. Your trusted source for the latest AppSec news. It's time for Application Security Weekly. Generative AI is powerful, but it comes with real risks, from prompt injection to data leakage misuse and agentic AI. The OWASP Gen AI Security Project unites a global community of expert practitioners who tackle these challenges every day. Together, they've built practical playbooks, adoption guides, and the OWASP Top 10 for LLMs, resources any team can apply right now to strengthen AI security. And it doesn't stop there. This is open source, built by practitioners, for practitioners, working together to secure generative AI. Visit securityweekly.com/OWASP to use the playbooks and join the effort to protect tomorrow's intelligence today. Security Weekly and CyberRisk TV are headed back to one of the biggest identity security events of the year, Octane 2025, put on by Okta, live September 24th through 26th from the vibrant city of Las Vegas. Octane 2025 brings together the best minds in identity, security, and technology innovation. And this year, we're pumping up the volume. Security Weekly will be on site in full force with Mandy Logan and Adrian Sanabria leading the charge. Get ready for live streamed executive interviews, exclusive on-site editorial coverage from SC Media, and brand new this year, a live streamed episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. It's your chance to engage with identity leaders, dive into the future of AI security, and hang out with your favorite Security Weekly hosts. And here's the best part. Security Weekly listeners get an exclusive discount. Just head to securityweekly.com/Octane, register, and use promo code OKTNSCMA25 to get your conference pass for $200. See you there. This is episode 347, recorded September 8th, 2025. I'm your host, Mike Shima, and I'm here with John Kinsella. Hello, John.
I'm still here. I'm still, I don't know, something hopefully entertaining.
Hopefully entertaining. You are indeed entertaining. That's why we're always glad to have you here. If you wanted to go do some travel and be entertained yourself, John, you could head out to InfoSec World 2025. It's this October 27th through 29th in sunny, they added that word, in sunny Lake Buena Vista, Florida at Disney's Coronado Springs Resorts. The workshops run the 2 days before, October 25th and 26th, and the 2 days after, October 29th and 30th. It is the premier cybersecurity conference. Save 25% with code ISW25-SW at securityweekly.com/ISW2025. And we have all those numbers and letters in the show notes. So if you didn't remember from there, go check them out. And as promised, John, speaking of things to remember, we've got to remember to do some news this week. And it's just this is my slow enter into yet another week of, it feels unavoidable, but I've got a bunch of stuff around AI and LLMs. So that's what the AppSec world is these days. That's what people are looking at.
Just lost half our listeners.
and half the LLMs, I don't know. There's got to be some agents out here that are paying attention to us. Maybe we can inject them somehow. So let's start off with some examples of vibe coding gone wrong. This is the malicious versions of NX and support some. I'm not speaking it all today. This is tough. And some supporting plugins were published, even though, I do love an alliteration. The short story of this, if I can stumble through, is that NX, which is some software that as they say, optimizes your build, scales your CI, and fixes failed PRs. Well, it's built for developers and AI agents. It's also built by developers and a little bit of Claude code, it appears, that introduced a vuln. And this vuln that was introduced was one of the most dead simple command injection from Bash. If this were a CTF, this would be like the level 1 of the CTF, as far as like how can you execute a command via a echo $. And long story short, after that simple command injection, some people pointed out, say, hey, you probably don't want this. An attacker went back and was able to exploit the command injection by having NX build and run all of its scaling CI and all of its fixing the failures and everything it claims to do against the non-main branch, the non-master branch. And so even though they fixed this, the attacker said, well, you've still got some old, the old vulnerable version sticking around in the branch. Let me go and trigger that. And so once again, they were able to trigger it, pull out some tokens, and then they were able to masquerade and inject some malicious software. So all of the post exploitation is honestly pretty much, we've heard this story before. What was interesting is that the post exploitation also involved doing some vibe coding. Is sort of the living off the land was using, if you already have some agents that are being called, I'm just going to use those agents for you. So there were some entertaining aspects to this, and maybe a couple more things I want to get to in the write-up that they provided. But I know you've been doing some vibe. Well, I shouldn't say vibe coding. That sounds mean and rude. But you've been doing some AI coding. How has that been going for you with this kind of article in mind?
The type of stuff I do is different. So I don't care if someone says I'm vibe coding. I refer to it, the term of art nowadays is spec coding. So I'm more about building a design document first with AI and then having it implement that once it's to the place I want. So not quite the same, but still, if you've got an agent you can manipulate it, then hey, but might as well, huh? What I liked about this is that the timeline of the write-up is so detailed. And it's something I've sort of come to appreciate. Like, how can you be as detailed and accurate about every single little thing that's going in there so you know you have the whole picture? And yeah, they tried, and the attacker sort of sidestepped and did his thing in a different direction. But it's that game of cat and mouse is sort of fun to see it in text after the fact. I'm sure it wasn't fun at the time. But yeah, I think that's going to be one of the interesting paths here is as it's, do we get, how long until, I don't think I know of any yet, how long until we have a vibe coding app that's specifically for malicious code? Mm-hmm. And then, it's basically, I can see someone saying it's going to be like a software LLM version of like the little Flipper Zero that everyone's going mad about. Right. But yeah, that's probably what we'll have to keep an eye out for, how long until we have that type of thing, really being able to amplify what the human can do.
Clippy Zero. That's what I hope that the branding goes for. That would be fun. And indeed, the write-up is for something that started with like, oops, this was a dead simple, honestly, very embarrassing type of vulnerability. They countered that with a more detailed and thankfully transparent explanation of what went wrong, as well as what they are going to do about it. And if you read through, it looks like some very specific actions that you can see, someone should take that action, and that action is measurable or checkable, or you could see that somebody did that. So that's also, if you're going to make a mess, clean up afterwards. Mm-hmm.
As I think about that before we hop on, going a little further with that idea, I was just talking about someone grab a copy of Kali Linux, train an LLM on, hey, here's all the tools you have on here. Here's what they're capable of doing. Here's how you can use them. And then sort of walk it through like here's how you first go and do reconnaissance and testing and try to find a weakness and exploit it. That'd be an interesting little hobby project.
That would be fun. And I think too, I would encourage that. And the one thing I'm going to worry about is I'm sure we're going to see on, there's a queue, I won't name names on air, I'll tell you afterwards, John, but there's a couple of like InfoSec news websites that I'm sure would say, the sky is falling because John just recommended how to have LLMs, learn about how to misuse Kali. And we've had that discussion when Metasploit was coming out, which was originally, here is how originally in Perl, long sigh, but that had rewritten in Python about bringing exploitation to the masses. Here's how a tool can generate some exploit code for whatever target you want, this version of Windows on this chip, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm mostly saying that as if we're worried about that these tools exist, we're having the wrong conversation.
Yep.
We need to be worried about how are we detecting this type of activity? How are we having stronger architectures? Which I think maybe even calls back to how do we have better specs rather than better vibe coding? As even just what you were describing, how your approach is these days. I'm going to use that because that might actually be a good segue for us to a Krebs on Security article about the ongoing fallout from a breach at AI chatbot maker SalesLoft. So SalesLoft has been in the news because here is a SaaS product that lots of companies that you're going to recognize, Slack, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, OpenAI, the list goes on, have been their data or their customers have been compromised via this. And so on the one hand, I'm going to sort of give this gets the 3 snoozes out of 5 because it's, hey, your SaaS can be compromised. And if you're using the SaaS, you have to be aware of what data's on there. It has 3 LLMs out of 5 just because it's the world of LLMs. This is a chat bot. So it's topical. This is how it's being used. And I was struggling to figure out what's the good AppSec discussion here. And maybe it's just whether or not you're using this, how quickly can you detect tokens have been compromised, which is maybe a little bit harder to say. But what's an easier AppSec activity would be how quickly can you rotate your tokens? Are you bugging your engineering team and it's going to take them 3 days over a long weekend to do this? Or do you have, because they have to do it manually, or do you have good automated mechanisms in place? So my AppSec call to action this week from this article is take a look at your tokens. How many, or your secrets, let's say. Do you know where your secrets are? Can they be rotated? John, I know this was a 3 snoozes out of 5, which is it's a good article from Krebs. It's just more the topic is the snooze. That to be clear,
it's it is not related to me, but you'll have to ask me off air also about. This is our episode of like Ask Us Off Air about when it comes to key rotation.
Best kind of podcast there is.
Yeah. We're not going to tell you any good stuff, folks. No, it's. I think this is one of those things that you need to have those tools. You need to have that runbook. You need to test the hell out of it, right? Like at least annually, if not more. Like really, if you're in a situation where you need to rotate your keys and you suddenly realize, oh, let's go take a month. Not good. So, yeah, I know that's not the core of the article, but still, it's. I have to make one last comment. What was it? Oh yeah, SalesLoft's their tagline, the leader in AI revenue orchestration. Congratulations to the marketing people who came up with that one.
Everybody is singing their praises this week and enjoying that merry melody to riff off that orchestration. Speaking of YouTube, I didn't speak of it yet, but speaking of AI, here's one. Here's an article that actually came across your radar before mine, John, and I think I did tease out in my mind a little bit of AppSec relevance here. But YouTube secretly tested AI video enhancement without notifying creators. So this is an article from Ars Technica. Let me throw it over to you to perhaps introduce this.
Yeah, so this was about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'm looking for the guy's name, Rick Beato, who runs a pretty interesting YouTube channel, actually 2 channels on really technically nerdy music stuff and like looking at like Taylor Swift and how she does her bars and like her stuff gets put together and going over like top music and sort of the patterns between them. Then he gets old man cranky and starts talking about like the kids these days with their pop but anyways, it's still sort of entertaining. So he noticed either him or one of his commenters on YouTube said, "Hey, your video looks a little weird." I think he noticed it actually. And they went through and they started digging. And another music podcaster also said, "Hey, I'm seeing it too." And what they figured out, and YouTube's admitted it, that after a video was being uploaded, like a show like this or any of these things are professionally produced. There's like people behind the scenes that are making us look pretty and making us sound good. After all that work was done and they were uploading the video, YouTube was doing a little bit of manipulation to try and improve the sharpness as an experiment to see how viewers would react. And once the viewers found out, they didn't react well. So it's that's sort of the setting. It's a bit of you can leave the AI part out of it, ML part out of it, and say it's just a sort of a gotcha, what are you doing? But then also it becomes a part of this, like, as we have more and more of these tools, either people are looking for excuses to say, hey, we're using AI, or you've got a tool and you're like, hey, what could I do with that? Well, let's try it over here and see what happens. And yeah, that's sort of a bit of the discussion that we're going to have for the next probably few years.
Absolutely. And it brings up if there's a theme that I'm going to think about this week and bring out with all our articles, there's a theme of trust. And in this case, my mind also went to the idea of phishing. We have all these phishing exercises and phishing awareness. As I mentioned in the intro, October's coming and we're all going to be told, don't click on links. Even though I don't know what links were designed for otherwise. But I'm bringing that up because, we as InfoSec, AppSec have all these aspects of this is what a sketchy email looks like, or this is what a sketchy link looks like. And so we have, for better, or I'm going to argue perhaps most of the time for worse, trained a certain set of people to be suspicious of links, suspicious of content. And as you pointed out, there's the same feeling around, did this person use AI and what's the transparency? And it's not so much of did the original creator use AI, not use AI? It is this the original creator's content? What has been changed? And to be clear, I'm making a pun here. This was the changes were being for using Gaussian blurs or some fun ML algorithms that technically are just some really cool FFTs and some Laplace things. And if you want to geek out as math people, we can do that. And for that'll be our second podcast. But it's not LLM generative AI, but it's not that far removed from it in the sense of what I, as the creator, uploaded is now very different or has become different from what end users are seeing. And speaking of music YouTubers, I also follow Ben Jordan, someone else who does music and science. And he also was talking about how Gen AI LLMs were basically hallucinated this whole trip he had made to Israel and a lot of political things that he had to go and tell his audience, no, I'm supporting Gaza. I'm not, I did not actually go to Israel. This is the LLM summary has been conflating him with other podcasters in very bizarre ways. And I'll have to link to the 404 Media article about that. But it's just interesting that yay plus big plus one thumbs up to all the music YouTubers out there that we follow. But it's funny that they're the ones getting being impacted by this. They care about what they're producing, clearly.
Let me throw one more shout out to another podcast, Shell Game by Evan Ratcliffe. I don't know if you've gone through this. It's probably a series, like a fairly short one. So season 1 is done. But Ratcliffe I believe he's an author for Wired or Ars, one of the two. So he's done some other stuff in the past we've probably talked about, but people have definitely heard of. But what he did at this time is he paid one of the LLM services to upload a bunch of his audio, since he's a podcaster, he had it, and it trained a chatbot to be able to speak quite like him. And then the 6 episodes is sort of going through how he uses this chatbot on different folks. But so I started because it's entertaining and funny, having it listen to having it answer the phone calls when the scammers are calling and stuff like that, and like having the two chatbots talk back and forth, sort of entertaining. But it gets into the philosophical behind it of like, okay, well, when do you send the chatbot to a meeting versus going to the meeting yourself? Or when do you write the code yourself, if we take it back into this world, versus have, the bot write it? Or what do you modify on a podcast? What's acceptable? When is this John and Mike, and when is this two idiots, sitting on a GPU somewhere that, well, we're not idiots, obviously. To be clear.
I was going to say.
To be clear.
We've already got that part covered.
I tend to refer to these things as idiots. But yeah, where's that line? So that's if folks are interested in this topic, that's another fun one.
And it's a very helpful setup for an article I pulled from IEEE Spectrum, framed as, will coding AI tools ever reach full autonomy? Now, there's an aspect here that maybe the premise doesn't have to be full autonomy. Maybe they can be assistants, as you were just explaining the music podcast as well. And we'll have to come up with some good recommendations about music and music podcasts to listen to on all my outros. But the point here about coding AI tools is that the short answer is, not right now, not yet. We could frame the answer as in a slightly more optimistic way. But what I appreciated about the article and the accompanying white paper that is based on is that it does break down a taxonomy of what are the tasks? What does it mean to write code? And one of my pet peeves about discussions around LLMs writing code is just, this LLM wrote a whole bunch of lines of code, or this wrote these lines of code, or lines of code, which we've already for a long time have pointed out, lines of code is not the way we evaluate humans. Nor is it the marker of the importance or the features of a feature. You don't just say, John, I need 10 lines of code by the end of the day. You're asking, like, here's the spec, as you were saying. Like, this is why I think, putting, reading between the lines, this is why you're approaching that vibe coding in that way. And for me, two things that stood out as examples of what this paper looks like. One was code refactoring, which, yay, I'm team refactoring. But they do point out that success for code refactoring typically goes beyond functional correctness or metrics. You don't just rewrite code to be more correct, or you rewrite code for the sake of it. You rewrite code to be more maintainable, to be more readable. Part of maintainability, they also call it extensibility. And what they point out as well is that those qualities, quote, are inherently difficult to quantify and highly context dependent. Meaning, is this more readable? Is this more extensible? An LLM doesn't have the context. In here, context doesn't necessarily mean context window, how many tokens it can handle. It means, can humans deal with this better? And I thought that is just a really good way of framing and thinking about, is this LLM, is this generative AI coding assistant assisting me, replacing me, potentially doing either one? And I'll say, and pull another one and throw back over to you, John, is that under the broad software maintenance, it does talk about pull requests, PR reviews. And we saw in the very first article with NX, that was an LLM generating some code. An LLM didn't review that code, but would an LLM have caught that security? And from an AppSec Weekly type of podcast, we hope that LLMs could do that, but we don't know. And so do we just need a really good greps or something else? So those are the parts that spoke to me on how to the conversations around generative AI and coding. Don't know if it grabs you in the same way.
No, you said a bunch of really interesting things. I'm trying to figure out where to start now. I wasn't taking notes. So what I started off the ceiling at the beginning of you just talking about that is, we've bantered back and forth here over years of the last thing I want a developer that's on the clock to do is to refactor code, because that's like not adding functionality.
Agreed.
But so the thought comes to me is like, if my team, someone on my team, say like a senior engineer on my team said, hey, we let the idiot run over the weekend and it refactored our data plane so the code is more readable. What would be my reaction to that? Probably not very positive. But where I'm going is like, what I'm saying is like, so I'm not taking up a human's time. So maybe not the data plane. Maybe it could be like, I don't know, an API call or something like, hey, I have a go refactor it. I'm constantly, unfortunately, I am constantly, I'm frequently looking for, like, when I hear something, I'm like, hey, could I have the AI do that instead? I'm open to those type of things and it's not that I want it to get done. It's I'm open to the experiment to see is that a useful way to use it? That's where I am right now. But hey, if I can refactor a function, let's say, not an app, a function, and have the idiot do it while my dev is at lunch, has potential for a win-win. Maybe. The personal experience, when I started off on the side project I was doing, I realized at some point that you're talking about lines of code. The idiot had created this Python file with multiple Python files, each with around 4,000 lines in them. I'm like, no. So I had it do the refactoring on that, and it actually came out pretty well. Like, it was actually that same process. So like, hey, come up with the spec, figure out what you want to do, like have it analyzed, like how do we do this properly, and then what should a new file structure look like, and go through and do it. And that was pretty clean. And I can see Claude getting better, like from when I first started using it to now. That was a few weeks ago, where it actually said, hey, I should write tests for this also while I'm going to make sure that I don't break anything. So I was like, oh, it's sort of getting better. Not 100%, but better. But the final thought that I was sort of daydreaming about there at the end is, and it might be, so the core, well, I got one different direction. The core thing I think about this article is this stuff is continuously getting better. So I might not want, we don't talk about like, oh, we're going to get rid of developers. The Amazon or AWS, one of the CEOs came out and said, like, that's a stupid idea. This is just not going to happen. How can we get devs to work better is very interesting. So can we use that as a multiplier to like even 1.5x what they normally do? So I think that's what's interesting. We'll keep going over next year or two. But one of the bigger problems we have in open source is that code review, right? And it's like sort of like what the NX guys are like. You have to be good enough to know what's that echo thing, what's going on here. It feels like there's a strong chance that the LLM could help with the code review itself, allowing the open source packages both to be more efficient and also, I'll say more secure. Those words are having a hard time coming out of my mouth. But I think there's a potential for it. I think what I've seen, like, I don't do it a lot, but for one of the articles we were looking at here today, we'll cover in a future episode, I told Claude to summarize it just so I could see what's going on. I do it with code. I've gone into code bases where like I don't have time to learn them. I'm like, hey, can you tell me, there was something I was trying to get data out of an application, a web app, and I had the access to the source. And so I asked a different code tool, hey, can you tell me where's it getting data from? And it's like, oh, it's using AWS APIs. It's using like some JSON API and then the EC2 interface. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. But didn't really feel like writing the code to interface with that myself. And I'm like, hey, well, where's it storing that stuff that it's getting? It's like, oh, it's putting it into a SQLite database. I'm like, well, I can't access that because it's on a production server somewhere. So I'm like, but it still is a very interesting experience just to like go, hey, what's going on with this thing without having to go through and look over the code itself. I did that in 45 seconds versus half an hour. So I think there's value there from the review point of view, but maybe worth a study.
Yeah, I think that we had a conversation the end of July, I think, with Louis about pen testing, and he referenced DeepWiki. So deepwiki.com, great resource for just, it's similar to what you're saying. What does this open source project do? What is in this code? And it's a great way of summarizing. And I think, there was one thing that you said there too, is, as you're thinking about, is this a good use of AI, of LLM? Notably, I want to ask you about that a little bit. So here's our mini interview with John. You didn't say, is this going to be insecure? Because the first thing, I don't think on any developer's mind really is am I going to write insecure code or not? It's more of, is this useful to me? And I was curious, do you feel when you're thinking about the team is going to use an LLM for something, like, is this wasting their time or is this producing something useful? I was trying to tease out because those do feel a little bit like it's still on the pessimistic side of the spectrum about LLMs rather than the helpful side.
Oh, how do I answer that? The direction as a engineering leader that I'm trying to take is I don't want. So we have stats about adoption, and the adoption in my teams is quite good. But I'm not going rah-rah of like, I want you all using LLMs to get your code done. The specific message I'm giving to people, and I hope they're getting, is I want you to play with this and get a sense for it. And quite honestly, it's not so much even for in my team or my company. It's like, well, if you're going to be in the software development world for the next 5-10 years, I'm pretty sure you're going to be using these things, so you might as well start playing with them. There are some folks who are concerned about this. Oh my God, we're going to lose a bunch of time because people are just going to be like learning how to use these and not create code. I'm not one of them. I trust that people sort of understand to play and go, that's not working, let me go back to the normal way. But that's a possibility. I mean, when I sort of got into this, I took a week off from work and I spent it in front of Cloud Code, right? So yeah, it's definitely can be a time sink. From what I've seen and from what I tell both, and it's actually interesting when I talk to management about how to use these things too, my management, the people I report to, how do you use this versus how do I talk to a software developer about it? But in both situations, usually what I'll say is like, hey, try it a little bit, go walk away, let the brain think about it for a while, and go back and try it again. Because I think that there's a learning thing, right? It's, and as I said, spec code, or I think that's one of the things in this article is I don't think you can approach software development the way we've done it for the last 30 years. You have to be able to take a step back and go, okay, now I've got a new thing. How do I use that? How does that help me either write secure code or write better code or write more code or, yeah.
No, that's interesting. I think because it teases out the idea of, I think what you were describing is this is what someone does as creating a system, understanding architecture rather than I need to write a couple of test cases or I just need to write code because that's what I'm being measured against. As we said, that's hopefully no one is doing that these days. No, yeah. And that's also a helpful segue because I was setting up, there is one other article from the Rust Foundation about the Rust Innovation Lab, and they're talking about Rust TLS as one of their first successful projects. And actually, this is also came out of the Prosimo folks, memory safety folks, and I think we've covered it at least a year ago. And so one of the questions, a bit rhetorical, of course, is what would be the next project to do to turn into Rust? And the reason I'm saying this is, we're not saying this is what we'll spend in LLM time on, but there's the idea of I'm a developer, I have a constrained amount of time. Where do I want to spend it? And it doesn't sound like I want to spend it on letting an LLM run over the weekend just to write some code for me for the sake of the code. I want it to accomplish something, either recreate my data plane in a hopeful way that's not going to actually destroy all my data, or it's going to rewrite a tool that I use all the time that is TLS into a memory safe version. So I just have fewer, this is a security-minded approach. Mm-hmm. So with that, I wonder, whether it's just a refactor, like from LLMs a project that you would throw to an LLM, or in this case, hey, Rust folks, go here's a project, and this dear people go right on this. Do you have a short list that would come to mind of something you would love to see that would be part of this like Rust Innovation Lab effort?
No. And the question I asked you off air, I'm going to bring back here is, and I don't think, let's see. Okay, so there's memory. Oh, no, it's both words. I'll quote this sentence in a second. But the question I asked off air ask now is like, is my interest around memory safety or around performance? I've seen situations where Python code has been rewritten into a Rust-based application. And again, you've heard me, we were just saying, it's like, the last thing I want to do is rewrite a refactor. That's expensive and costs time. But if I can improve performance significantly or increase security significantly, then it catches my interest. So it's I think in the commercial world we're, let's see, to a degree, excuse my wordsmithing here. I think to a degree in the commercial world, I don't want to use that word. In my particular, no, I can't say that either. I care about security. I can't not say that. If I don't say that, I'm really going to get you right. Yeah. So I care about security.
Comments this week.
Frequently, the reason I'm looking at Rust is for performance, right? I'm running a massive performant data plane. And yeah, I care about security and the memory safety of it. and it could have been written in C and it wasn't. And that is probably for the memory safety aspect of it, but it also could have been written in Java or something else because we are a Java shop and we didn't do that. And so, right, there's reasons we're doing this. But anyways, a sentence off their Rust Foundation page: the inaugural Rust Innovation Lab project of Rust TLS, a memory safe, high performance TLS library. So they're thinking about these things too, and obviously they are. Yeah, I don't know. There's no off the top of my head like utility or project that I'd be like, I need this thing rewritten. I'm sure if we sit down at a whiteboard, we'd come up with a list of things. Like we talked about sudo. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think, and I appreciate the struggle you went through on wordsmithing for our listeners, because I think that's a good example of showing that AppSec, we hopefully are well beyond the era where AppSec is go rewrite this in secure code, go rewrite this for memory safety, or just go rewrite this because of security, where security is the number one reason. There's just why, or there's no time, or there's trade-offs there. You're taking up someone's time where there's opportunity cost to pull in to make all of our economics friends happy.
The part of the thought process going through the head there when I was doing that is security is just numero uno for us. Like that's top of the list. It's really not a joke. It's sort of insane. And then the other side, like leave us out of it. Think about some of the video drivers or memory drivers. I don't want to mention other people because I'm not trying to make it us versus them, but like they were rewritten in Rust. And that was for mostly security reasons. So it's definitely still one of the larger reasons that the language exists and why it's being used. It's just frequently, and it's probably where I am right now is I'm thinking about performance. But yeah, it is, how do you do that trade-off, or how do you describe it?
And part of that, if you go to something like memorysafety.org, you'll see Rust TLS on that list. And as an example, we mentioned sudo. DNS is probably another good example. NTP. We've covered. There's a AV1 decoder. So all of those, video, text, or I say text, audio, video decoders, notorious for having bugs, and zlib. So these are a handful. But I think the reason I wanted to highlight these is that they're pretty foundational, they're pretty pervasive, especially something like DNS. But that doesn't mean everything has to be rewritten into Rust or memory safety. And I think that's the nuance that I'm trying to convey here. So good luck doing that in a podcast, because there are just a lot of, I'll make fun of NPM as well, that pull in tons of dependencies, but plenty of the NPM stack, PyPy stack, what have you, can still be written securely. And there are plenty of other security concerns beyond just memory safety to worry about. So I guess more of this is, I applaud the effort, and I'm glad to see a foundation investing in this, because I think that's probably the biggest thing that's missing is we need more of Rust Innovation Labs, more of OpenSSF, more of people that are willing to support, give money, give development time to open source projects so that they can harden themselves, so they can adopt fuzzing. So those are the aspects, I guess, that I'm trying to highlight here and hoping to see.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think fuzzing sort of died down compared to its the chatter about it, let's say about 2 years ago. I still find it, I think there's a bit of a, I made this comment on LinkedIn, I think a while ago. A lot of output of an LLM could be considered a fuzzer in just a different way, right? It's just sort of trash. It can be. But I think there's uses for some of these more complex things out there where you don't want to write a unit test or an integration test for every single permutation of what's going on. And then it's like, okay, can I with intention throw a specific form of kitchen sink at that thing? I think it's quite valuable. Yeah,
and we saw even from this, we'll have to bring on Keith again, because the Trail of Bits there for the AI Cyber Challenge, they were very much on the philosophical path of here's an LLM that orchestrates a fuzzer, essentially, or here's how the LLM produces a better corpus for the fuzzer. So clearly there's some you got your peanut butter and my chocolate, and these are two great tastes that taste great together. But John, this has been a really fun conversation. We do need to save some time for our pre-recorded interviews from Black Hat because Doug White and Jackie McGuire had a good time at Black Hat this year. So let's save some time for there. And we've got plenty of news to pick up for next week as well. So I want to say thank you, John. Thank you, everyone, for listening. As I mentioned, check out the 2 recorded interviews we have coming up. First up is one about cryptography, quantum computers, and the challenges in moving foundational ways to write cryptography to quantum safe ones. Then it's a discussion of alert config and avoiding burnout in SOCs. So thanks to Doug and Jackie for covering those industry topics. And of course, thank you for everyone for joining us. Remember to subscribe, check out the show notes, share us on the socials. And speaking of music, check out Departure by Duet. We'll see you next time on Application Security Weekly. Tired of the endless cycle of cloud vulnerabilities? Avoid over 95% of CVEs with minimal container images from Minimus. No bloated base layers, no unnecessary packages, just what your app needs to run. Drop Minimus images into existing deployments to dramatically reduce your attack surface and remediation work. Maximum security, minimum effort. That's Minimus. Visit securityweekly.com/Minimus to learn more. Ransomware, supply chain attacks, 0 days. Cyber threats don't wait, and neither should your defenses. With ThreatLocker, you're not just reacting to threats, you're stopping them before they start. Our Zero Trust endpoint protection locks down your environment with pinpoint control over what's allowed to run and what's not. No guesswork, no blind spots. Just proactive, built-for-now security that keeps your business moving. Want to see how a true default deny strategy works? Head over to securityweekly.com/threatlocker and take the first step towards shutting the door on threats before they even knock.
Day 2, the horror. I mean, we survived day 1. We survived several parties, especially parties that had free drinks and free food. I think the food was more dangerous than the drinks. I was able to control the drinks. The food was getting out of hand. I mean, you can only eat so many deep fried Scotch eggs out of a barrel or something like that. But welcome to Black Hat 2025 Day 2. We are here. We're recording live from the Cyber Risk TV studio at beautiful Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas. I'm not telling you which floor. I've said that a bunch of times, but I said it again. I'm your host, Doug White, and joining me for this interview is Ted Shorter, the CTO and co-founder of Keyfactor. Hi, Ted.
Hello, good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on board.
Yeah.
I was actually excited to see this interview, and we kind of get to pick who we interview with, unless people are like, under no circumstances will I talk to him ever again. And we had a few of those, but typically, I'm like, and this was a topic about quantum, which I'm very both intrigued by and terrified of, because quantum's cool. It's weird.
Yes.
So, and when you take cool and weird and terrifying, it starts to go, okay, I'm in. So I did want to talk to you a little bit about that, because I know quantum computing is coming. Mm-hmm. And obviously, it's going to be a sea change for people when this happens. So, could you maybe give us just a little bit of background about where is that going? Like where, whatever you want to talk about on that.
Yeah, I mean, in general, quantum computing is about exploiting the particularly weird properties of quantum mechanics and quantum physics, which admittedly make no sense whatsoever. To the point that Einstein even rejected most of the quantum mathematics because it didn't make any sense to him either. But it turns out it actually is true. It keeps getting verified by experiment after experiment. But basically, quantum computing is about using those properties to perform computations. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that while it is not that effective at some computations, it is extremely effective at others,
like crypto.
And so it bodes a lot of promise for a lot of things. There's a lot of tremendous advances that will come from sufficiently strong quantum computers. However, one of the downsides is that the RSA and ECC algorithms, which basically underpin the internet and pretty much all digital life as we know it, are one of the things that quantum computers are particularly good at breaking if they are sufficiently strong. So Yes. So if that happened today, that would be absolutely catastrophic.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, that would imply that we're not ready for this. I mean, I know that NIST and people have been putting out, both contests for development of new algorithms and so on, and there have been some new algorithms developed. Well, where are we right now? So let's do that first.
Yeah. So NIST has standardized 3 algorithms so far to replace RSA and ECC. There is a 4th that is coming. Should be hopefully by the end of this year. And there are more standards actually in the works. So NIST, as you mentioned, runs these kind of challenge processes to standardize new algorithms. That's how we got AES. It's how we got SHA-2, SHA-3. And so it's a standard process that they do. But they've started, they've put set 2030 as kind of the deadline for deprecation for RSA and ECC. Many other government organizations for other governments around the world have started also putting out their guidance for transitioning away from RSA and ECC onto these new algorithms. Canada, the EU, Australia, and several others. And so that's kind of the line in the sand of, hey, we need to get moving off of these by 2030.
I was really happy to see that, though, because all too often it seems like we're sort of responding to catastrophe, and it was almost like I was expecting when I first started reading about quantum, because this was quite a while ago, like 10 years ago. I was reading about quantum and I was like, well, we're going to deny this exists until, it happens. And somebody goes, no, we have a Chinese quantum computer online and everything's been, cracked in like 15 seconds. So that's pretty terrifying. So you guys at Keyfactor went out and you bought InfoSec Global, which is a crypto discovery and asset management company, and Cipher Insights, which is a lightweight network sensor company. Is this, tell me where that goes. I mean, why did you buy those things?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's all about starting that quantum transition journey. If you're going to migrate from these algorithms to the new ones, you can't migrate what you don't know you have. And so both of these technologies are about getting a very deep understanding of what you have, what's being used, and where. Cipher Insights is particularly good at actually watching your network and letting you know what's actually happening on the wire, and in addition to what systems are actually communicating to each other, right? So in the future, being able to say, I want to put a new algorithm on this web server, but in order to do that, you need to know what systems that might break as far as compatibility and so forth, right? Because support for these algorithms from the vendor community is not uniform. And so you need to know what's going to break.
Because there's going to be a lot of breakage. I mean, anytime you change something as fundamental as this underlying, and I don't mean changing it a little bit, but I mean, just when people were trying to change, like SHA algorithms, it caused all kinds of chaos. And I had clients who were saying, we can't, we were recommending things and they're going, yeah, but we can't do that because if we do it, the other end doesn't work because to
that end, actually. And that's when you said you were happy to see that 2030. I was both happy to see guidance, but also scared, knowing that I think most organizations, like if you haven't started at least planning for a quantum transition now, you're already too late, right? And we saw from SHA-1 to SHA-2 how long that took. For most organizations, between the time that SHA-2 became a standard and the time most organizations were able to get off of SHA-1 was, a decade.
Is this, I think this is probably then just going to start creating little bubbles in like OT and things like that, the operational technology kind of stuff, because that's usually the laggard of all laggards. When people come in and say, well, we bought this robotic sawmill in 1981
and it runs Windows
and
XP,
it was designed to last 100 years and we can't afford to replace the robotic sawmill and it doesn't use any cryptography at all. And so you just end up having to say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to build a big wall and we're going to put the robotic sawmill behind the big wall. And that was all fine until people started going, yeah, but we want to plug that into the internet so the controller can actually live in Indianapolis and work on the sawmill in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, same thing will happen here. Stamping machines, things in hospitals, handheld scanners. But I think that's the other part with the InfoSec Global pieces. They're all about going deep on the endpoints themselves. And what's interesting is, we started looking at this from a quantum perspective. But what we realized is once you start shining a light on cryptographic use within organizations, there's actually a whole lot of mess now.
There is.
Even before quantum.
Oh, yeah.
And InfoSec Global does a tremendous job of going extremely deep on, cryptographic libraries, keys and certificates embedded inside of binaries, finding things basically that almost no one else is able to find, being able to pull all that together into the things that Keyfactor is already doing as far as certificate issuance, certificate automation, building that transition from the beginnings of discovering what you need to migrate all the way through that, being able to complete that migration and then monitor your progress.
This is, yeah, I hadn't really thought about this before because, plenty of time I've asked clients about like, can you tell me a map of what all you have? But when I'm asking this question, it's not about crypto.
Right.
It's about like, do you know where your servers are?
Yep.
Do you know where your network infrastructure stuff is? And I've never really thought about this deeper question about like, do you know where your crypto is and what it is?
And most people haven't. I think that's the thing. It's one of those things, I have been in cyber my entire career, and even in things like PKI, things that use cryptography on a daily basis. But that's the one piece. Security is always about the weakest link. I think cryptography is one of those things that we've all sort of taken for granted, and now we can't.
It's a pretty hidden layer kind of thing, though, I think, because it is a seamless thing in a lot of cases where I buy a device, I plug it in, it's communicating with some other control board, and especially in OT and stuff like that. And, you ask the people that built it, how does this work? And they're like, I don't know. You just plug this wire to that wire and everything works. And you don't unplug the wire, you're fine. But in reality, there's a lot of layers in that communication stack that may be going between those two places that could involve crypto and suddenly could be a problem.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it is really literally anything that communicates on a network is going to need to change.
Yeah.
And so that means every vendor that makes anything that communicates, every TLS stack in the world is going to have to get swapped.
I feel like I shouldn't be here. I need to go.
It's a massive change.
I think I might need to. Yeah, I think I got a couple of things I need to look into.
The good news is there are vendors that are starting. AWS has launched support for some of the quantum algorithms. There was a report that Kubernetes now has support for some of the new algorithms, and so like that transition is happening.
Yeah,
and that is one of the things that people can be doing now is just start talking to your vendors. Right, you can't move until your vendors have support for these things.
I agree.
Back to your example of these old outdated systems, but like you need to understand where your vendor supply chain is.
The robotic sawmill, that's one of my favorite. I actually saw that once. I was like, this is the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Robotic sawmill that now is compromised because it uses outdated.
I think this robotic sawmill used like a button that said on and a button that said off. So it was like the end. The crypto was not there. It was just like you push that, then you turn it on. We were just reviewing, and I'm like, is this a threat? And the guy's like,
someday.
It's only a threat if you go in there. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to go in there. Like, I don't know what's going on, but there was a lot of stuff. And, they just sort of these logs came down this belt and went in this gate, and then like bad things happen. And one of the terms that you brought up was called full crypto visibility. It was a term. And I wanted you to tell me maybe a little more about what that means, because initially when I read that, I said, oh, this is like open sourcing the crypto, which was this old issue, but I don't think that's maybe what you're talking about now. I was thinking about the Clipper chip. You remember this story, and the government wants to put a back door in it, and then nobody would use it because they're like, well, I don't want something with a back door built into it, and that's just stupid. And I was thinking, okay, so the open source idea of my crypto algorithms, I do think that's a good idea. The algorithm should be strong enough that it could withstand somebody knowing how the algorithm works. But I think you're talking about understanding this organizationally.
Yeah, for sure. We're obviously big fans of open source as well. Keyfactor is actually the caretakers of the open source Bouncy Castle encryption library. So we're actually on the front lines of implementing all these new standards and making sure that they're all correct and get built into a whole lot of other products and so forth. Many of whom are exhibiting here at the show. But no, for us, it's about understanding. You need to understand where your cryptography is, where it's being used, how it's being used, and when you get to things like quantum, the cryptographic capabilities of machines. So, like, is this thing quantum ready or not? Right? When can I move and switch over algorithms? Because we saw that with SHA-1 to SHA-2. There's people had to wait until the very last piece of their environment got updated to support SHA-2 before they could move. That took way too long. We don't have that much time this time. So just be able to understand, like, okay, what else do I need to work on? What else do I need to patch? What else needs to be updated? Where do I have to apply, the sort of encapsulation techniques like you described? But you need to build that strategy now. And the only way to start doing that is to get a full picture of what is actually in use where in your environment.
So how do we start this process? I mean, is the initial part of the process just going to be like, okay, let's make two piles of legacy stuff that is just doomed,
right?
Because we know we're not going to fix this. The robotic sawmill, maybe it's going to work. We're going to have to mitigate. We can't. This is never going to change, and we don't have $100 million to replace this. And this other pile of things that we need to go through. Because to me, if a client asks me, that would be my first step. Is like, let's just find stuff that we can't fix. Your X-ray machine, we can't fix it, and you can't buy a new one. But if we got this other pile, this is this pile that you're talking about.
Yeah, you need to get that information from your vendors and let them. They need to tell you. If it's the sawmill, people say like, "Hey, we have no plans. I don't even know what
we've been out of business for 7 years."
Yeah, exactly. Then you need to take that into account. But I think that's the first step is understanding from your vendors what their roadmap is, and so you can build those. The current pile is there's almost nothing that's quantum ready right now.
Yeah,
that's changing though. Like I mentioned, you're starting to see some things that have that support. Going to be a lot more when we get to probably Q1 or so of next year. Should see quite a bit of support. That's when, the mainstream vendors, the Apples, the Microsofts, that kind of stuff will likely have support for this stuff. But you're right, there's those piles. And I think that also comes across though with a risk assessment, right? Because you also need to be focusing on the things that are the most valuable to you in terms of data, in terms of, what are the keys to your kingdom and what do you need to protect those? So I think that's the other cross section of that is capabilities, but also combined with the things that are. And
you can mitigate. It is possible. People are very sloppy with this. It's something I say all the time: is private VLANs and don't expose management interfaces on your network infrastructure, because why on earth would you do that?
Shouldn't do that anyway.
Do it all the time. Yeah, they do it all the time. And the other one I always said was called Dr. Fung's lab, and Dr. Fung had all this legacy equipment that was running Twinix and all kinds of wacky stuff. And Dr. Fung was not to be trifled with because he had a lot of grant money. And when people have a lot of grant money in research and academics, and you go to them and go, "We want you to fix this," and they go, "No." You go, "Oh, he's got a lot of grant money." Because, that person can tell or they'll pack their bags and take their grant money somewhere else. And so you end up having to mitigate around those kind of things. What about... So you said talk to your vendors. 100% agree. Absolutely. You should be talking, and you should be doing that right now, right?
Absolutely.
You probably should already have done that. So maybe put down the monitor. No, don't stop watching. Yeah. But you might want to leave right after.
I will say we've only gotten a few questionnaires ourselves from vendors.
Yeah.
So this is process, as far as I can tell, just starting.
That's scary.
Yeah.
What about proprietary stuff? Because I worked in a long time ago, but it's probably still there. Like they had proprietary components of code, sometimes much, much, much code that, where do we start on that? There's no vendor to call.
If you're talking about your own stuff
No, it was like companies that I worked for that had, a million lines of proprietary home rolled code that they wrote,
Yeah. Obviously part of that too. And this is also something that InfoSec Global has capabilities around is scanning source code repositories, right? So assuming you still have the source, if you don't, that's a different problem. But we can scan binaries as well. But it's like, understanding what actually is being used. If you have the source code, being able to find where that is, there's a lot of work now being done around sort of agility toolkits where you can sort of start to separate the task of performing the encryption. Or some developers just say encrypt, decrypt, sign, verify, and let the algorithm and choice and so forth happen at a different layer. Those are things. But I think this is one of those cases where there's no one solution here. There's a lot of tools that can be brought to bear on this. And, it starts with having this assessment of what you have, planning out what your strategy is going to be. And then for each of those things, whether it's, cryptographic keys, you need to be talking with your HSM vendors because they all have different roadmaps as far as quantum support or not based on which type of hardware you're using. And so just getting all that laid out, reference that again with the things that are most important to you, and then figure out the plan of how you're going to move stuff.
So you need a quantum plan. I know I tell you need these plans, although you need a response plan, you need this plan, you need that plan, but guess what? You need a quantum plan too, and you better start on it now because even though 2030 sounds a long way away, it's literally not.
Overnight.
In fact, 2030 is less time than since the last time I came to Black Hat. So that's pretty terrifying. So thank you, Ted Shorter, for joining us today. If you want to find out more about Keyfactor, please visit securityweekly.com/KeyfactorBH. For all the other Black Hat 2025 coverage by Cyber Risk Alliance, please visit securityweekly.com/Black Hat. Thanks again to Ted for coming here. You stick around because we'll be back right after the break with a whole bunch more interviews from Black Hat 2025.
Welcome to Black Hat 2025. We're here recording live from the CyberRisk TV studio in Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm your host, Jackie McGuire, and I'm joined today by Seemant Sehgal. He is the founder of BreachLock. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jackie.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about something that I think is probably going to trigger a lot of people who work in SOCs today. It's something that I complain about pretty often, which is alert fatigue and the fact that we've all got 10,000 untriaged alerts in our SIM, and a decent chunk of those say that they're critical based on how we have or have not set up our SIM. So is this something that you see a lot?
Yeah, I do see a lot. And of course, I come from a financial background, right?
Yeah.
Before I started BreachLock, I was heading the cybersecurity assessment wing for ING Bank in Europe.
And finance is crazy, right? Because you have, not only is it the crown jewels or actual money, but it's 24 hours. Like banks run 24 hours, so you can't just shut the network down to upgrade
Absolutely.
something.
And the adversaries are following the sun, so you have to too, right? There's no option to put your guard down. And, I've always been a big fan of both offense and defense. And that's also what I promoted at the bank. I think people get too much focused on the defense, and that's where the alert fatigue comes from. Not that that's bad, but by the end of the day, you don't want to have like a needle in a haystack problem and then blame your analysts that they didn't find something there. So I think it's also a proactive approach that helps, and that's something that I've promoted. And that's why these days I'd like to talk about vulnerability fatigue and not just alert fatigue.
And so what was really the onus that caused you to say, I need to start a company to solve this problem?
Right, pretty much the same, right? So when I looked at the investments that the corporates were making, I was buying a lot. I was on the buyer's shoes, reporting directly into the group CISO. So I was part of the CISO's office. All country CISOs were my peers. So I was, having a say in the budget and what they buy. I was doing a lot of proof of values for the bank and kind of putting my stamp, hey, this is ready to go. We can deploy it. So it all boiled down to too much focus on defense, like I said, and not the proactive side of security, meaning we don't want to wait for an incident to happen to tell us what's broken. Why don't we have a look and find out proactively what's broken so that we can fix it? And, that led me to believe that there's more innovation that needs to be done in offensive security. And, that's what BreachLock's all about. We're probably the most complete offensive security solution that's available on the market today.
Yeah, and so you have the technique that you use is adversarial exposure validation, right? So how does this work? So I've got all of these alerts in front of me. How does this help me figure out which ones actually matter?
Right. So, that's it. It's about fixing what matters, right? So, in the bank, I learned that there's like a ton of vulnerabilities. We used to get PowerPoint decks, red, yellow, green, and nothing really moved each month. And when we did a red team, which was more an ecosystem hack than a vulnerability view of the world, meaning you focus on people, process, technology, and go from there, it showed a complete different picture that a lot could be breached, where you could have like 3 critical vulnerabilities sitting for 3 months and nobody gave a damn about it. Right?
Well, we also see that companies will do, a pen test or a red team or something like that, but then they haven't allocated the resources to resolve whatever comes up from that.
Absolutely.
From that test.
You're absolutely right, Jackie. And the reason I think for that is that, again, the fatigue side of things, right? Because you get a report with a ton of vulnerabilities. So what we've done with this new product, it's an agentic solution. So it's built off generative AI. A lot is happening in that space, as you know, so we are on the forefront of that from an offensive security perspective. And what we really do there is we kind of, put all the vulnerability intelligence. First, we find it very fast, thanks to Gen AI now, with all the feeds that we can corroborate. We've very beautifully crafted an agentic solution that writes checks for CVEs as they're published, and this is huge. So, with the vulnerability scanning world, you are usually seeing the top players competing. Hey, I released this check in 24 hours, 48 hours. So we are doing it near real time now.
Yeah.
Again, because of the generative AI innovation that's happening all around us. And from there, when we get the vulnerabilities, we stack them all up from an attacker's perspective and sort of give you an attack tree view, right? Or a kill chain view.
So if I'm an attacker, here's what the actual realistic 2 or 3 kill chains would look like that I could use in this
Absolutely. This is how I would get the crown jewel, right? And once you see that in action and you either see a green or a red being, it's a red flag, like, somebody can get to my crown jewel, be it an Active Directory or be it, a Drupal or whatever, simplest thing possible, but it still gives the attacker a foothold on your internal infrastructure. Then it starts to move, because then the remediators start to get more excited about, hey, so now that I am able to visualize this skill chain, which of the steps or vulnerabilities or CVEs or CWEs do I need to patch to break the whole kill chain, right? So you get a two-way motivation, one from the management, because of course they're worried that something wrong can happen, and also the system administrators or the DevOps engineers get much more excited that they could actually patch something that works. And if you give them a laundry list of vulnerabilities that they need to fix, then of course there's many bottlenecks and they don't get the approvals with the DTAP. So it's not only the admins to blame, it's also the state of the technology we have. You can't just throw patches at systems, because you need to have business to be able to live the security side of it, right? So I know, coming from a bank, you have to follow the DTAP cycles. You can't just patch left, right, and center. And whenever we had the critical, we get the bypasses for all of that, and rightly so, right? So I think with the AV concept, you're able to see the kill chain in action. So you know exactly which vulnerability matters, and then you fix that. So fix what matters.
Yeah. Well, and I also, I talk to CISOs a lot, and they have a really hard time kind of talking to their executive peers about what they're doing, about why it matters, about the potential fallout. So I imagine when you can take, because generally it's this trade-off between, well, we have cyber risk insurance and the chance of a breach is this percent. The cost of the breach is, $10 million. And if there's only a 15% chance, it's less money to, And I think with this, if you can say, no, there is a demonstrable path to critically sensitive information that we have to close, it's not theoretical risk, right? It's real world risk that has to be addressed, and that you can actually tie to enterprise value or enterprise risk. Because I always say, as a CISO, if you go in and you say, all right, CEO, we have operational risk, they're like, I don't care. Like, well, this operational risk translates to potentially losing $5 million a day in revenue if we're crippled, then they start to care,
Absolutely.
right?
And you can tie that to the crown jewel. That's why the flags are really important. So in a AV concept, you start from objectives, and then you go to the final crown jewel, right? So the AI is able to come up with the context of the target, right? So let's say if I enter a target, abcbank.com, then the AI already knows that this is a bank. So the first step is to look at the threat intel that's relevant to that sector, and then pick the objectives based on that, and that's how the whole attack is done. And it's completely with human out of the chain. And I'm not a propagator of pen testing or red teaming needs to be done fully automated. So I'm not saying that. However, what we've seen is with this product that we've launched, we've got a lot of traction with internal teams. So the right way to put this is for enterprise internal offensive security teams. They see this as a mechanism to scale their own efforts, so they can probably focus on fixing stuff, and then the machines can find most of the things at scale.
Yeah, I think you're always going to need a human for pen testing, because you have 95% of it is known variables and things like that. But in security, shout out my couple friends who got caught in a fire escape stairwell trying to sneak into a party a couple days ago. In security, we tend to be a little bit mischievous, and we tend to be able to find the very indirect paths into things. So because adversaries, yes, they are using a lot of automation, but they also still have humans kind of actively trying to find the sneaky things. So, but to your point, if there are known variables that you can address, that frees up your team for more time for the actual fun stuff. Because those are the fun red teaming activities, right?
And I get into this discussion all the time because, at BreachLock, we do both. So we have the human-led part that uses technology in-house. So that's more for enterprises that want to have an external pair of eyes looking at their infrastructure, their applications, whether it's for compliance reasons or just an extra pair of eyes, independent view. But we also have these platform or tools that are used by internal teams. So we do both. So I get this question very often, like, can it be really automated? And I always respond by saying it's not an either or.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like, either you would have automated or you need humans. It's both.
Yeah.
And we need to stop this discussion and just focus on the scalability benefits of the technology and just end it with saying like, no, humans will be in the loop and they need to be in the loop because that's what the business demands. And, that's the same option available, right? You can't just let it on machines to...
It's not microwave or stove. Sometimes you need both, right?
That's a good way to put
Some
it.
things don't go in the microwave.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So is there a typical profile for a customer? Are you generally mid-market? Are you larger enterprises? Does it kind of span the spectrum? Like, what does your typical customer look like?
So it's all the way from Fortune 500 to mid-enterprise clients, mostly software, financial, healthcare. These are the three sectors that we, like you would imagine. We also have like critical sectors like energy and some of the biggest companies, manufacturing. I can name it. Like pen testing is everybody's problem, right? You have to know where you
ICS is one of my favorite areas. Like I always like the target breach that happened through their air conditioning control system.
That's one of my favorite ones also.
I used to my husband owned a mechanical contractor, and he's a mechanical engineer, and so I ended up having to learn how to write the industrial automation. So when the target breach happened, I was like, I know BACnet, I know these controls.
Yeah, and to your point, a lot of OT clients also reach out to us, and rightly so. So I really love the fact that the awareness is rising. Also, that they want to do it more continuous and not just like a once a year thing.
Not just check the box.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where technology can help, right? Because then you can have humans do, let's say, a couple of times a year or quarterly if you have the budget. And for the rest, why leave it out? Just test it with, the existing parameters. And I think generative AI is really pushing the bar there, right? Because it's a self-learning mechanism. And the more you teach it, the more it performs better, right? So that's...
Does that cause... So... I think I've noticed a real sentiment change from last year to this year with security teams, and that last year it was like, block everything, we can't let this in. And this year it's like, all right, I keep saying this, the horse is out of the barn. Like, we're not going to put these horses back in the barn. Let's just figure out how to contain the fallout. So I imagine you get at least some pushback from CISOs around using AI, because with agents, with people, there's at least some delay in communication, and then there's somebody to fire if things go sideways. Like, who do you fire if an agent does things instantaneously that are really bad? So how do you address those concerns? Like, what are you hearing with regard to AI concerns from CISOs, and how do you address those?
Very, very relevant question. So I'm glad you asked that, Jackie. So I'll address two sides of it, right? So first, let's talk about breach log, and then we'll talk about the industry.
In general,
because I'm a practitioner, right? So I have to give you that answer. So from breach log perspective, obviously we saw that coming, right? And what we've built is we've built an AI transparency module. Now, I'm not saying that's the answer to all the questions we have with AI autonomy, but it's a start, right? Yeah. So exactly, you create the transparency for the CISO, and you're able to see, like, for example, we have like 18 agents. Then they're able to see what each agent is doing, what data it's picking. We only take the metadata and share it with AI. So it's not your infrastructure or your application info going, because, I mean, the AI doesn't need to know that. It just needs to know what the target is, and it doesn't need to know who the target is, right? Yeah. So you just take the metadata, and that's how it's processed. So we show, just like in a proxy vulnerability testing tool, you would see the get request, the post request. Similarly, whatever is going to the AI and coming back from the AI and the commands that we are injecting, like you said, with the agents interacting with each other, they're able to see everything. So that's one, transparency. Second is that, just like in a Tesla, especially with auto-driving cars, in Europe, we have norms where the driver has to keep the hands on the steering, otherwise my beamer starts to beep. Right. So similarly, we have an assisted mode in our solution, which means that you can switch it on with a toggle button. So if it's a very risky test or a risky environment, then it'll ask you at each step.
Okay.
Right. And of course, it not ask you I'm going to run an Nmap scan, or I'm going to do XYZ. That's the normal. If you're worried about that, you've got other problems. If systems would break because of a port scan, then you have other problems. But more for the high risk actions like launching an exploit or even establishing a connection, even if it's passive, right? It would ask you, and then if you approve as a human, it goes further. If not, you choose what you do.
So I want to paraphrase this because I think this is important. You said one is start with metadata. So one I think is privacy. So start by only collecting the actual data you need to do the work. 2 is transparency. And then 3, it sounds like control.
Yeah.
So give people the control they need to make decisions.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's the breach log side of things, right? Now my practitioner answer. So look, I've seen the movie before many times. I've heard all the buzzwords, seen the technology revolutions. The last one that I can draw a reference with, and I'm sure you would agree, is cloud, right? Yeah. So when I was at the bank, we were having discussions like, hey, should we build a private cloud? Should we stay in the data center? Look where we are now. Like I was speaking to a client that's, in a defense setting, right? And, we were discussing like, okay, on-prem solution. In the 10 minutes later in the conversation, it turned out they were in a multi-cloud environment. So that's how we refer to on-prem these days in a defense setting, right?
Yeah.
So I think similar things are going to happen with AI. It's totally fine. We're all discussing where the data is going. My prediction is like 5 years from now, or maybe even sooner, we are all going to just adapt and accept, for the right reason, not for the wrong reasons, a multi-model setup where 3 or 4 big players, just like you have now with AWS, GCP, and Azure, would be kind of, the trusted partners for any large corporate to deal with. And all the SOC 2, ISO 27001, the data security standards would all be in place, and we would all have calmed down our emotions and be okay with it. The only thing that I don't have an answer to, I'm still looking for that, is that the autonomy angle for the AI when it kind of crosses the guardrails.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer for that. I think nobody does.
Well, you'll be a billionaire when you figure it out. So.
Yeah, I don't know. But from breach log perspective, I have to find the answers for my clients. I'm still looking for that.
Yeah. Well, we're going to bring you back in 2030 because you said 5 years from now we'll have you on again, and we'll replay this before your interview, and we'll see if you were right.
You bet.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. I could probably talk to you for about an hour about this, Seemant. So thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for the good conversation.
Yeah. Thank you. And if you'd like to find out more about BreachLog, please visit securityweekly.com/BreachLogBH. And for the rest of our coverage, you can visit securityweekly.com/Black Hat. I'm Jackie McGuire. We are in the Mandalay Bay at Black Hat 2025 in Las Vegas, Nevada. And we will be right back with lots more guests and great segments. Stay tuned.